rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times. Star Wars #1.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Hey, look at that. We are back. Back, brand new year, 2024. Happy New Year, everybody. New year of Rebel Force Radio, new year of Star Wars content. We got lots to look forward to in 2024. We have The Acolyte, that Skeleton Crew. We've got a new season of The Bad Batch, the third and final season of The Bad Batch. I was just talking to some folks at the day job this week about The Bad Batch. And as I was talking, I was talking about the whole conflict that they've been covering in this series of how they've been decommissioning the clones, getting rid of the clones, sidelining the clones, doing all kinds of horrible things to the clones and getting the conscripted troops in there. And as I found myself getting really excited and kind of remembering all of these great plot points and things that are happening in The Bad Batch. So yeah, Acolyte's very exciting. Skeleton Crew's very exciting, but don't forget about Bad Batch Season 3. And if you haven't checked out Bad Batch Seasons 1 and 2, I highly recommend it. It's very, very good. And if you're looking for that connective story about, I know what it was. Someone asked me if the stormtroopers in the original trilogy were clones. And of course, that led to the whole, well, all right, let me tell you. And it's all being talked about in Bad Batch. So anyway, lots to look forward to in 2024. I'm looking forward to it. I know you're looking forward to it. And I know especially one guy that's always looking forward to new Star Wars, no matter what year it is. And that is, of course, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. We're back in the saddle for a whole new year of Star Wars. And man, the year has started off on fire. So I was just jumping on my skin to get behind this microphone again. So I'm so happy we're back and we're ready to talk about all this hot news that's been accompanying Star Wars since the beginning of the new year, including, most importantly, a new film announcement. Big news. Big news.
Yeah, very big news. This is probably, the most official new film announcement that we've had in a while. I don't know why it feels so. I guess it feels so official because it's much more of a known quantity. Jon Favreau is a known Star Wars creative now, well established. And so there's something about this announcement that just feels a lot more real, whereas the other ones just, we're, what do you call that? Once bitten, twice shy. Well, we're like 4 times bitten, 5 times shy, or depending on how you count a lot of these abandoned projects.
For sure. Sometimes those announcements get made, I believe, to pad up special events like shareholder presentations or Star Wars celebration conventions. Just the fact that this one stood on its own and came at us kind of out of the blue is something that I think adds a lot of legitimacy to it. It's not part of some show. It's actual news. So we'll get into all of that. I was just so excited, jumping out of my skin. I felt like I had the greatest day on Tuesday. I got a free sandwich from Potbelly's. New Star Wars film was announced. I got a bonus for something that I worked on. It was all happening, and it was very good. Traffic wasn't bad. It was just a great day.
I'm picturing you like SpongeBob, the best day ever. Just singing at the top of your lungs, driving.
Oh, yeah. Wendy said you should go buy a lotto ticket. You need to get a lottery ticket today. But I don't believe in stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to change my luck that dramatically. But things were happening that I really appreciated, most notably the announcement of a new Star Wars film.
Yeah. Huge.
So I noticed that the fan reaction wasn't like as over the top as it has been in the past. Maybe because there wasn't a whole circus involved with the announcement. It just came out of the blue early in the morning as a press release. And, it got me thinking. I was like, wow, it seems like a sort of a tepid fan reaction. And I think that's just the result of so many false starts with so many Star Wars projects over the years. Has the entire fan base sort of feeling once bitten, twice shy. And even us here at RFR, it's not like we stopped the presses and did an emergency live show or anything like that. It's like, no, we could take our time deciphering this.
Yeah,
What's
10
that?
10 years ago, we might have done that.
2 years ago. Last year, we would have done it.
I don't know. We've been living in this world of false starts for a while now. But yeah, I didn't feel it quite the way we have in the past. And as I was talking about the day job earlier, I had a couple of people, mainly they were all asking me if the title was real. Everybody was coming to me saying, is that the real title of The Mandalorian and Grogu? That's got to be a working title, right? That's got to be a working title. I think it's the real title.
I think that's the thing.
No reason to believe that it's not.
So we can start calling it TMAG from now on. TMAG.
TMAG. All right.
Hey,
I'm
how many times have you seen TMAG? Oh, yeah, I've seen TMAG 3 times. Yeah. TMAG. TMAG, The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Well, yeah, so much to break down for sure. But we do have some acknowledgments that we want to get through here at the top of the show. I want to thank RFR listener Derek Webster. He just sent me a really great Christmas card, which was very nice. He's an RFR listener, and it came with a patch, this great patch here of R2-D2 with his Santa hat. And apparently he runs Padawan Bear patches and pins. But he just said, Jason and family, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and may the Force be with you all for 2024. Loyal listener, Derek. So that was very kind. Derek, I don't know how you got my address, but hey, thank you for the Christmas card. It was very much appreciated, and the patch is really great. Thank you.
RFR listener Scott Rifen, who's been listening to our podcast forever, and he's joined us on some events we've done, like Star Wars Weekends in Orlando. He was nice enough to send us a couple of Disney figures, one for me and one for you, Swank.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you, Scott. That's awesome.
It's a great figure. R2 S4M. S4M.
There's always season 4. There's always some sort of, because this is the holiday astromech with the red stripe, and he's got the bar service on top, like R2 and Return of the Jedi on Jabba's sail barge. But they always try to hide some sort of little meaning in those letters and numbers. And I'm just not smart enough or clever enough to. There we go. Let's get a nice wide shot of that here. So
there's information on the back.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah. Those are so much fun. And, are those drinks removable, Jim? Can you tell? Do they come out
yeah,
of the
I believe
tray?
so.
So what's great about those is if you've got the Cantina denizens or maybe the Jabba's Palace denizens, you can use those and stick those in the hands of your action figures.
And they look like margaritas, too, so I appreciate that. Affectionately known as Sam to S4M. I guess, yeah, it looks like it's a Sam a little bit.
R2 Sam. Okay, got it.
R2 Sam. So I wonder why Sam. But he is an overworked astromech modified with a drink dispenser and serving tray who delivers drinks to denizens lounging aboard Jabba the Hutt's luxury sail barge.
I'd like to be a denizen. Jim, what do we got to do to be a... How long do we have to stay at the cantina in Galaxy's Edge before they just say, "Oh, those are a couple of our denizens over there."
Yeah, those guys, don't worry about them. They're just denizens. and do they like give you like a business card or a membership card?
Yes, official
your denizen
denizen
membership card. And do you get invited to like denizen club meetings and things like that? Scott Rifen also sent along some classic Return of the Jedi Topps wax packs.
Oh, now you're talking. Look at that. Those are vintage, authentic. Yeah. Oh, the gum's probably still inside, or at least part of it. Boy, he's hit me right where I live because Jedi was the first Star Wars movie I saw in the theater, and of course was hitting up I remember we would, after a couple of viewings, I would end up at a drugstore and get the sticker packs to finish my sticker book. And if I was extra good, I might get a couple of the wax packs. But I love, my son is really, really into professional football and has been getting into football cards. But the trading cards are so different now. They're not the wax packs. They come in boxes. You have to ask the store clerk to unlock the glass case to even get them. They used to just be sitting out near the checkout in those cardboard boxes back in our day.
Like in the candy aisle.
Or right, in the candy aisle. That's
right next to your Snickers, Nerds, and Skittles, you'd see a pack of trading cards.
Yeah.
And it would cost about the same, too. Now there's such a premium attached to collectible trading cards. They're very expensive.
They used to be, even up through, I think the last trading card set that I collected was in '89 with the Batman movie. And they had the wax packs for that. And I think they were still a quarter a pack back then.
I bought a box of those. In what was that, 89? Yeah, I bought a box.
Did you?
A whole box of the
You
waxes.
weren't messing around. You're like, I'm an adult now. I'm not buying them by the pack. I'm buying the box.
It kind of worked out that way. I took a road trip with my dad to Cooperstown, New York to see the Baseball Hall of Fame. And along the ride, I was opening those wax packs. And I think I developed 2 sets out of those.
Out of the box. Wow.
Yeah. I still have the box. The cards are still there, too.
Yeah.
So
did you buy the wax packs of the Star Wars films back in the day? Were you getting those?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I still have my originals.
Your childhood originals. Great.
Oh, yeah. 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 So it was always fun. I was a big card collector, non-sports cards and baseball cards, a little bit of football.
I have this very vivid memory of being so nervous going into second grade. Just terrified. I don't know what it was between first grade and second grade, but I was just so scared. And the night before the first day of school, I had, my new book bag and everything was laid out. And I knew that there had to be something that would give me comfort. And I grabbed a couple of my Return of the Jedi Topps trading cards and I slid them into my backpack, just knowing that they were there. And I remember, being able to sort of like sneak and take them out and look at them, but it just provided that little bit of home, that little bit of comfort,
comfort
for the first day.
Comfort. Well, we find a lot of comfort in Star Wars, and I'm glad you brought that up because it takes me to the next thing I want to talk about, and that's Kyle Newman's appearance with Wendy Snyder on WGN Radio here in Chicago. Kyle called into Wendy's show as she conducted an interview with him to promote A Disturbance in the Force. The topic of finding comfort in Star Wars came up between Kyle and Wendy. And so I have a little clip of the interview here. You guys can hear it on the WGN website. We have links at rebelforceradio.com. But this is Kyle Newman just before the holidays with Wendy Snyder on WGN talking about how Star Wars can be that chicken soup for the soul you're looking for.
Right.
What also happens to you when you watch Star Wars and you think it's a fabulous movie, and Jimmy Mack made me watch it before we got married because I hadn't seen it, and I loved all the movies, but I don't need to see them again. What is inside a person that makes them watch them over and over again, like you, Kyle, and like my husband?
There's a couple things. I think it's comfort.
Yeah.
This familiarity, people gravitate towards things that make them feel at home and make them feel like they have a safe place. And I think Star Wars does that for many people. It's a very big universe that has room for a lot of people and ideas. And what's great about Star Wars is it also has a spiritual core. And I think people go back to that because maybe they're not finding that spiritual thing somewhere else in their life. So what they do is they found these life principles in Star Wars, and revisiting it helps reinforce it and enrich it. I think there's a lot of mantras and ideas that emerge from Star Wars, the philosophy of it, that trickle into my life and my profession. So that's why I go back to it. It's also become a family, a community of fans. So you're partaking in something. It's tribal, like if you're a fan of a sports franchise. So there's that element to it. But like I said, it's a rich universe with tons of Easter eggs and details and planets and monsters and places to visit. So your imagination is free to play, and that's why there's been so many toys and books and games and movies.
I feel like I'm missing out on it.
Well, I know, and I've heard that you know more than you let on.
Yeah, maybe.
You know your Jawa from your Tusken Raider.
I do.
But maybe it's just by association.
Yeah.
It was a great interview. I was so glad, Jim, that you sent us all you threw up the bat signal the morning that it was going out, and it was great because it streams online, so you don't have to actually be there in Chicago and listen to it all. And it was a great appearance from Kyle. But of course, Wendy always has a way of making everybody sound good and look good. But it was really, I encourage everybody to listen to it because it's a great interview with Kyle. He's super thoughtful, and Wendy clearly had a lot of fun with him, so it was real good.
Yeah. Lucasfilm's Leland Chi, who is a friend of RFR's, he reached out to me and he's like, "Oh my God, are your worlds colliding right here or what?"
When podcast George and husband George collide. Yeah. But, Wendy's used to that, and she's been part of that world and you for a long time. I mean, the whole idea of getting into Star Wars podcasting was to combine some of those worlds of yours. So
absolutely. So, and I'd done a little Star Wars coverage on CBS radio back when the prequels were coming out. I had so much fun doing that. I knew mainstream media wasn't going to let me continue with my regular Star Wars reporting especially after Revenge of the Sith came and went, because there were no
you weren't going to be covering the Clone Wars film for any big radio stations. That's for sure.
No. And the only time they would let me cover Star Wars is like every 3 years when the film would come out. So
usually when people would start showing up in the theater lines, right?
Yeah,
in
the lines.
Lot. Yeah.
The
lines.
They'd give me a big ass cell phone and send me out there.
Go talk
it's
to those
fully
nerds.
Charged. They're like, okay, this cell phone is fully charged. It'll last you half an hour, so make the most of it. Okay.
Remember in the big bag with the Velcro and I remember those.
Yeah. Those were crazy. So that was great to hear Kyle on with Wendy. A Disturbance of the Force was released and became a huge hit. 100% ranking on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it was named one of the top 10 documentaries of 2023. So hats off to Kyle and Scott Kozak, who kept us involved in the making of that documentary from when it was just a germ of an idea in his head. And he was kind enough to feature us, a clip of our interview with Charlie Lippincott. Rare interview with Charlie, and feature us in the documentary, and also Adam F. Goldberg and Jeremy Kuhn. Jeremy Kuhn, who was a producer on Napoleon Dynamite. We had so much Napoleon Dynamite action happening at the end of the year.
Yeah,
between Jeremy and Doug Heater reaching out to explain to me like how the term Amblin gets thrown around in the film industry, and then Jeremy Kuhn's on the show, and then the big end of the year finale with Napoleon Dynamite himself, John Heater. And I was tripping out listening to a replay of that podcast because there are times when John is Napoleon in that interview. He actually becomes Napoleon.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's involuntary, of course.
Right.
But
right.
But then I
the character, created the role, so it's part of
and it's
part
just,
of him.
To me, it conjured up the image of like you and me walking the high school hallways with Napoleon, being annoyed by everything, maybe getting a dance lesson from him or something.
Gosh.
God. And then actually you and me voting for Pedro. That would all be part of my dream scenario.
That would be part of it. Well, Napoleon Dynamite has definitely invaded our house in a good way because both of my kids are, at random times saying, "Come get your dinner, Tina, you fat lard." That's now the mealtime call in our house. Come get your dinner, Tina. So anyway, but you know what? The holiday season, we weren't unscathed by potential tragedy. And Jim, as you do, you've always managed me quite well, and you were not immediate to tell me the near cataclysm that occurred in the Mac house over the holidays. I only found out about it after the fact. It wasn't in real time for me. So
right. There was a scare. There was a scare. Yeah, there was a scare in the Chicago suburbs. Just helping Wendy with some Christmas decorations and stuff, and I took a brief break in the restroom and opened the door, and I was shocked. I came out and was just shocked to see Puppet Lando laying face down in my entrance hallway.
Now, we've seen him laying face down in a gutter before, but never in the hallway of your house.
It was scary. It was just such a surreal moment. I was like, wait a second. I was like, I had to rub my eyes. I'm like, that is Puppet Lando laying on the floor face down. How did he get there? What's going on here? Why is he in my front hallway?
Did you think maybe one of the kids had grabbed him, or?
I thought maybe he was trying to escape.
Well, that's possible.
I just couldn't figure it out until I got closer and I picked him up. And his head was all like matted with spit, like saliva.
Ooh.
And I turned him over and I noticed that there was a big chew taken out of his collar, his famous cape. There was a big part ripped out of there. And so I knew right away the culprit here was my dog, Kona. Kona attacked Puppet Lando.
Now, if I would have gotten the text that said, "Oh no, Swank, Puppet Lando's just been attacked by Kona," I'm so glad, because you would have probably ruined my whole night. I'd have been a nervous wreck about it. Yeah. I found out about it a few days later, and I got this.
Yeah, it was about a week and a half after.
Oh, geez. Wow, you really kept it from me for a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have some screen grabs of the text messaging that went on between you and me. The first thing I sent you is a picture of Puppet Lando, and you can clearly see on his left collar, it's missing. There's a big, look at that.
There it is. Yeah.
I mean, Puppet Lando is someone who's known for his suave style and sophistication.
Right.
He can't show up at a club on Cloud City looking like that.
Oh, no, it's just not done.
So, it was shocking. So I said, Swank, did you know Kona attacked Puppet Lando? Look at his left collar. Kona ate it. He ate it. And then here's the photo. You responded, "Oh, no, I bet Puppet Lando let out a squeal like when the Sarlacc wrapped its tentacle around his leg." I wish he did. He's strangely silent when Billy Mack is not around. But there he is, face down on the floor in the front hallway.
It looks so ominous. It looks like a murder scene here. Something out of Dateline.
I should have put the chalk mark around, the outline. The chalk mark outline.
Put some caution tape up in the hallway.
Yes. But there he is, yeah. And I said, I found him face down in my front hallway. Shocking. You say it looks like a crime scene. CSI, Besman. But thankfully, we called 911. He went into immediate surgery via a Wendy Snyder connection. You know, Wendy knows everyone. You know, your puppet gets attacked by your dog and part of its collar gets eaten. Wendy knows who to call.
She's got a guy. She's got a collar guy.
She's got a guy.
A puppet collar guy.
Someone who knows his way around felt. And he was saved.
Look at that. Look at the beautiful job on that.
Seamless.
That's incredible.
It's seamless. It's absolutely seamless.
Wow.
So Puppet Lando right now is resting comfortably from his ordeal.
How's Kona?
At Billy Mac's house. Kona shows no remorse.
He's still licking his chops.
He wants another shot at that. He wants another shot at that puppet. But no remorse from the puppy. So, but it was a scare. But thankfully, Wendy came to the rescue, and we were able to get Puppet Lando into surgery right away. And
all right.
So we'll see what 2024 has in store for Puppet Lando.
I hope it's
I'm looking
better than
forward
the
to
end of
this year. I think we're going to have a great year. I think it's going to be a great year for Star Wars. It should be pretty exciting, pretty interesting. We're already working on some May the 4th be with you plans.
Yeah.
So mark that date. I think it's important to take advantage of it this time around because this will be the last Saturday May the 4th is going to land on until the year 2030.
Oh, 2030?
It's only 6 years away, but it sounds like so much further away. It sounds
really
like,
does.
Science fiction 2030.
Right.
But so I thought, this would be a good year to take advantage of that. So wheels are in motion, not ready to announce anything right now, but we hope to have some exciting news about Star Wars Day 2024. May the 4th be with you. So stay tuned.
All right. We've got big news headed your way right now.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
Well, there's big news, and then there's big news, and you just don't get bigger news than a brand new Star Wars film, and that was the story that was leading the charge earlier this week over at StarWars.com, The Mandalorian and Grogu Journeys to the Big Screen. And when they say in the headline, The Mandalorian and Grogu, they're not just talking about the characters. No, they're talking about the name of the movie. Mandalorian and Grogu embarking on a new adventure to movie theaters, directed by Jon Favreau and produced by Favreau, Kathleen Kennedy, and Dave Filoni. It's in italics, folks. The Mandalorian and Grogu, that means it's a title, will go into production in 2024. There you go. Leapfrogging the other three known Star Wars films in production, pre-production. Plus, you got some other outliers there. You still got the Levy film. You still got the Taika Waititi film. You still got the Lando, which is now a film. So it's leapfrogging the three big ones, the Mangold, the Filoni Mandoverse, and the Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. And Jim, here's what I would say. It's a sure thing. When you look at the position that Disney and Lucasfilm are in, I'm absolutely certain that Lucasfilm is feeling the pressure from Disney to get Star Wars back into the movie theaters.
Oh yeah,
I think that is a certainty. So if you're Bob Iger, if you're Kathleen Kennedy, this makes the most sense. It makes the most sense in terms of a solid director in Jon Favreau. It makes the most sense in terms of solid fan base in the whole Mandalorian universe. Speed to market. They've already got a whole season. All they got to do is compress season 4 into a 2 hour and 20-minute film. They can pick the best ideas and the best elements out of it. So it makes a lot of sense. It does push the others to the side. Like I said, the Rey film, the Dave Filoni Mandoverse film, the Mangold film, and others. But from a business standpoint, I just don't think you can argue with this decision.
No, not at all. Let's talk business. You immediately are doing some things to whittle down the budget from a $300 million, $250 million, $300 million film budget. You could probably make a Mando movie at half the cost because they have so many already existing assets. And those will be recycled. Everything from background alien masks to the armor the Mando himself wears.
Right.
I'm sure we're going to see Grogu probably more articulated than ever before.
Oh,
and
is it possible we could get a CG Grogu? You think they would go that far?
I don't think overall.
Right.
But possibly in certain sequences.
Yeah. More use of it.
We may have already seen CGI Grogu and just don't know it.
Yeah, I think we have. There's been some scenes of him walking and some things, but yeah, it would be. They must have learned their lesson. I'm sure with Yoda, it's a lot easier said than done to recreate. As that documentary covered, from puppets to pixels. It's not as easy. It's not as easy. You mentioned budget. I just want to share this with you real quick. I did a little number crunching here, and Mandalorian, on average, across its 3 seasons, cost about $120 million per season, about $15 million per episode. That breaks down to about $375,000 a minute. And I went back and I looked at the budgets for episodes 7, 8, and 9, and those budgets ranged from $300 million, as you said, all the way up to $450 million. Mm-hmm. That breaks down to about $2.2 million a minute. So you ain't kidding when you say that this thing can really save a lot of money, but still capitalize on a very, I think, devoted fan base to this particular story, these characters, a very bankable Baby Yoda, Grogu.
It's been something I've been wanting to see, really, probably since the conclusion of season 1.
Yeah.
I thought the Mando was being developed on Disney Plus in the first place to develop it into a cinematic franchise of its own. And with Jon Favreau at the helm, a guy who has done so much in cinema, going all the way back to Swingers. And right. Then, of course, the stuff he did bringing in the modern Marvel Cinematic Universe to life with the very first Iron Man. And then the developments in technology via the Disney live-action remakes of The Lion King and The Jungle Book.
Right.
Favreau was at the forefront of all of that. It's about time John gets back into the director's chair for a feature film. The Mandalorian is tailor-made for movie screens. This is what I thought they were doing with Disney Plus in the first place, was developing new talent and new concepts to then graduate them into cinematic features. Mm-hmm. I believe the Rey film was the next to be released. But since the firing of Damon Lindelof and the hiring of Stephen Wright, or Stephen
Knight.
Wright, yes. Knight, Stephen Knight. Stephen Wright was a comedian.
Yeah, right.
Stephen Knight. Apparently, that script has yet to be completed. Mm-hmm. And I think the brass at Disney was expecting it before the end of the year, last year. So it appears there have been some speed bumps along the way in the development of that film. It just makes sense then to fast track season 4 of The Mandalorian, fast track it into a feature film and get it in theaters to meet that spring 2026 date that's already been thrown out there for the release of the next Star Wars film. They have to get something into production this year. And by this year, I mean in the first half of 2024.
Yeah.
If it's going to hit the screens in 2026. That ain't going to happen with the new Jedi Order Rey film.
No.
Not without a completed script.
No.
So...
No, those three dates, just as a reminder, May 22, 2026, we're thinking that will be this Mandalorian and Grogu film.
Yes.
There's also December 18th of the same year, 2026, and then December 17th, 2027. I guess you could probably slot in and maybe think that the Rey movie would grab that December 2026 slot, perhaps, but they got to really hurry up to make that.
Right. And the Mangold film isn't even close to being in production yet.
No, I wouldn't be surprised if Filoni's culmination film is that 2027.
I think you're going down the right path here.
And Mangold,
I really
I think, has gone the way of Taika and Levy, and just kind of it's sort of out there. I mean, now what's interesting about Mangold, though, Jim, is that he's still being mentioned in these official releases. So those three projects that they announced at Celebration Europe, they're there. Nowhere to be found is talk of Donald and Stephen Glover's Lando. Nowhere to be found is Sean Levy's film, Rian Johnson's trilogy, Taika Waititi's. Not saying that they're dead. I'm just saying that Lucasfilm is not giving any ink to those titles, those names, those directors in any of their official releases. Obviously, the media is still covering those things. You see Taika promoting something. They ask him about his Star Wars project. That's going to continue to happen. I would say the same thing will continue with Rian Johnson, even though that seems really dead in the water. But he'll do another Knives Out movie, and they'll ask him what's going on with Star Wars, and he'll talk about how his schedule just hasn't matched up with others, and, we'll just continue down that route, I think.
The Mangold film is the big question mark here.
Yeah.
Because we've heard that Lucasfilm has been trying to launch a film about the origin of the Jedi for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen S. Goyer was attached to something about the birth of the Jedi. And then now just recently revealed in a new interview with Hollywood Reporter, the Game of Thrones guys, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, they revealed that their pitch to Lucasfilm when they were part of the Lucasfilm machine, they said they wanted to do a film called The First Jedi. Basically how the Jedi came to be, why it came to be, the first lightsaber, yada, yada. They were, in their own words, Weiss says, "We were annoyed as hell when Rian Johnson called his movie The Last Jedi. He completely destroyed the obvious title for what we were working on," is what he says.
Wow.
But he does mention that he's friends with Rian Johnson, so I think that's just some friendly ribbing going on there. Asked about what went wrong, Benioff says, Lucasfilm ended up not wanting to do a First Jedi story. We had a very specific story idea in mind, and ultimately they decided they didn't want to do that. And we totally get it. It's their company and their IP, but we weren't the droids they were looking for. Okay. But you know what I think really killed them was there was a very harsh critical response to the final season of Game of Thrones that may have given Lucasfilm cold feet. And also what they pitched to them ultimately was something that they've been messing around with already. And so they may have had some predetermined ideas about where that story should go. The Game of Thrones guys just weren't on board with that. And so then they took off and they signed a big deal with Netflix, even though they had an agreement with Lucasfilm.
I got to say, at the time, I was really puzzled by their move to jump over to Netflix and all of that. But when you look at and see what happened with the two solo directors, when you look and see what's happened with folks like Patty Jenkins and others, I think they made the right move. I think they made the right move. I can't blame them. They could have seen the writing on the wall.
Yeah. So the idea of an Origin of the Jedi film it's been floating around in Lucasfilm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how much is going to be unique to this new film, this idea for a new film to be directed by James Mangold? Who knows? Are they taking stuff that they've been developing for the last decade?
Yeah.
For this Origin of the Jedi film, is that going to be something that Mangold inherits, or is James going to come in with an entirely fresh idea, and then they'll tell him to hit the road? But it's hard to say. But Mangold is mentioned in the press release.
Yes.
So there's no reason to think that his movie is DOA.
Right.
I'm sorry, Jason. You said you thought it was, but he's still in the mix.
Yeah,
clearly.
Yeah, I'm not willing to go so far as to say I think the movie's going to happen, but yes,
Right.
there's no doubt that they're still using Lucasfilm Inc. in their press releases to promote that versus some of the other names that have just sort of stopped being officially accounted for on these releases. So those three films are still very much in play. Jon Favreau was quoted as saying, "I have loved telling stories set in the rich world that George Lucas created. The prospect of bringing the Mandalorian and his apprentice, Grogu, to the big screen is extremely exciting." The title of the movie, as I was saying, people were asking me about it. Yeah, T-Mag. I guess you could say that it's not terribly surprising. Jim, we were talking a little bit off air, and I just said, there are certain things that have been happening in Star Wars since 2012 where I really feel that it's been dumbed down. I think about myself as a kid, 6, 7 years old, seeing Return of the Jedi, and barely able to read Jabba's subtitles, and asking my mom to read them to me or my big brother to read them to me, but I never got the sense that I was being talked down to. It wasn't kiddie entertainment, but we do live in a world where, and this is true in a lot of different areas, but where things are dumbed down. So when you look at The Mandalorian and Grogu from a studio, looking at Disney, where they release movies called The Ant-Man and the Wasp, or they release a movie called Solo, and who knows, this Rey film might just be called Rey. We don't know, or Rey Skywalker. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that's the case. So, disappointing.
I do like the title New Jedi Order.
Oh, I like that too.
Has a good ring to it.
I like that too.
Yeah.
But it's not terribly surprising. George's titles were corny. Let's face it, Phantom Menace, Ewan McGregor famously laughing at Attack of the Clones when that title was announced. Even he thought it was silly. But corny and dumb aren't the same thing. George was channeling those titles that you would see on those Saturday morning serials, and that's what really motivated him. The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, The Empire Strikes Back, big melodramatic titles. Corny, melodramatic. What's that?
Pulpy.
Yes, pulpy. Yeah. I feel like The Mandalorian and Grogu feels focus grouped, feels safe, feels like a committee. What are we going to call it? We need people. It reminds me of this old SNL sketch where you had Joe Piscopo as Sinatra, and he's talking to Eddie Murphy's Stevie Wonder, and he says, "I want to do an album of tunes the young people will enjoy. I'm going to call it Frank Does Tunes the Young People Will Enjoy."
Very on the nose.
It really, yeah, exactly. It makes me think that, Iger's like, we need people to know that this movie is about the Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yeah.
Let's call it.
Well, if you really want people to know it's about the Mandalorian and Grogu, then you should call it The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda.
That's
if you really want the honesty,
true.
If you really want people to know,
yes,
that's what you should call it.
Because people are going to say, who the hell is Grogu? What's a Grogu?
I'm just happy they're not giving it that tagline, a Star Wars story, which I thought I hated that. And they attached it to Rogue One, and they attached it to Solo. But I think that idea has been jettisoned. It was a bad idea from the beginning. They originally were going to call those things Star Wars Anthology.
Yeah.
But again, the dumbing down. Oh, people, that's a $3 word, anthology. Who's gonna understand
the Roman
that?
numerals, Jim, because they thought that people were going to be too confused.
Yeah, the Roman numeral thing though does make it feel a little top heavy once you get to a certain point. I mean, look at the Super Bowl now.
Right. Remember Super Bowl L?
Yeah, right. That was the only Super Bowl they actually included actual numbers in the logo because they didn't want to call it just Super Bowl L. So they called it Super Bowl 50.
Yeah.
And it had said 50 in the logo. That's the only time. And I'm like, wow, the Super Bowl is going to get away from those Roman numerals just like Star Wars. But no, Super Bowl 51 rolled around with an L1. So, okay, here we go again. But there's just a lot of good things about getting this bit of the franchise, The Mandalorian, on the silver screen. To me, it makes total sense. You have a talent like Jon Favreau. You have a story fleshed out if they are going to truly adapt season 4 into the next adventure with obvious tweaking, and also probably incorporate some leftover ideas from the abandoned Rangers of the New Republic show. I saw a lot of chat online. Oh, I wonder if this means Gina Carano's coming back. Guys, I wouldn't take 2 seconds of my time considering that. It's not worth the mental energy. She's gone. I mean, she's over. She's done. She's yesterday's news, and they'll never bring back Cara Dune. But what this film will do is provide a bigger platform for a guy like Pedro Pascal, who will probably appear in the film with helmet off, maybe a little more than what we've seen thus far in the show. And I think he'll be much more active in the actual action on the set and things like that.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, it has seemed like maybe he's had a foot out the door for at least the last year or so, and it's a voiceover role for him at this point. But with a feature, that changes things. Yeah.
So and with the feature brings in the money, the salary for Pedro too.
Right.
And I don't think he's making chump change on The Mandalorian as a streaming series, but as a feature film, he'll make bank.
Yeah.
And Lucasfilm will too, because despite all the money effort they've put into The Mandalorian, making it a big success, I mean, even we thought season 3 wasn't really up to par with the first 2 seasons, but it has been revealed that The Mandalorian was the top streaming series overall in 2023.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of magic there. And it's ready. It is ready for the silver screen. And I'm really excited at the prospect, quite honestly.
Yeah, I am too. I'm very excited about it. I was a little less excited about the controversy that surrounded Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy that started around, I think it was New Year's Eve is when she was interviewed by CNN during some of their holiday broadcasts there. And Sharmeen, we've known about Sharmeen since, what was that? She was
Sharmeen.
Sharmeen?
Yes.
Sharmeen. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Sharmeen. I call her SOC.
Sock.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sock. Okay.
Some people call her Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, and we'll get into that. Actually, nobody calls her that. I just made it up.
Yeah, I mean, certainly somebody that is, has a lot of accolades, 2 Academy Awards for
oh my God,
documentary, short subject. So these are 40-minute documentaries, and she's covered some serious stuff. So I think it. But Jim, these comments that she made, we'll get into them here. really just hit fandom like a nuclear bomb. They were. There's a combination of things going on. There's things being taken out of context. I truly feel being taken out of context, and then there's some silly remarks that she made. So let's get into it, and we'll take them one by one.
Well, she did appear on CNN on New Year's Eve. It was sort of like CNN was presenting, like New Year's Eve around the world,
Right.
And for their focus on Pakistan, they talked to Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, who is Pakistani, and she spoke briefly about the upcoming Ray film, and then talked about how she wants to make filmmaking more accessible for Pakistani women and things like that. But these are her first on-camera comments about the upcoming Ray film.
I'm very thrilled about the project because I think what we are about to create is something very special. And we're in 2024 now. And I think it's about time that we had a woman come forward to shape the story in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, and that was the comment that started to ruffle some feathers of Star Wars fans. Not that they're creating something special, but talking about it's her quote, "It's about time we have a woman shape a story in a galaxy far, far away." Well, okay, let's talk about that one for a second. From 1977 to 2012, Star Wars was really shaped by one human. Star Wars was George Lucas. It wasn't some sort of free-for-all, create your own adventure, everybody show up. It wasn't like that there were guards at the gate beating women away from contributing or shaping Star Wars storytelling, because it belonged to one person. It belonged to George Lucas. Now, you could also mention names in that era like Marcia Lucas, the Icons Unearthed documentary, did a fabulous job of shedding some light on what a major role Marcia did in shaping. Now, this is the thing. We know what she was saying. She was really referring to directing, but she made it a broader comment. And words have meanings. And she said shaping the story from a galaxy far, far away, despite the shaping of Marcia Lucas. Leigh Brackett, who wrote the first screenplay for Empire Strikes Back, who was abandoned. She passed away tragically. Carrie Fisher, long rumored to have doctored up some of the prequel scripts for George Lucas. But certainly her contribution to Star Wars in that initial era cannot be overstated. Now, then you get into the post-2012 era, the era of Kathleen Kennedy, the CEO of Lucasfilm. Talk about shaping a galaxy far, far away and being treated to stories, the New York Times, the women who run the Star Wars universe, the Washington Post, the surprising number of women behind Lucasfilm. StarWars.com, meet the women working behind the scenes of Star Wars. Yahoo, expect more female-driven Star Wars stories. This has been something that has been at the forefront of Lucasfilm PR for years and years. And you think about this story that ran 50% of the women at Lucasfilm, 50% of, this was the story here, from the Hollywood Reporter. Lucasfilm's Force, Kathleen Kennedy reveals an executive team more than 50% female. This was back in 2016. Names like Deborah Chow, Leslie Headland, Michelle Redjwan, Bryce Dallas Howard, Patty Jenkins, Carrie Hart, Carrie Beck. This narrative that is being furthered by we're still trying to make up for some wrongs of the past, that somehow women need not apply to contribute to the galaxy far, far away, is silly. It's divisive. And I think Sharmeen, in this case, she needs to get a new act. You know, this kind of thing works when you're covering women having acid thrown in their face in Pakistan or honor killings. Very serious, terribly serious subject matter that she has shined the light on in her documentaries, as well she should. And she should be rewarded for it, and she should be given all kinds of accolades and praise for doing that. But in the year 2023 in the West, this kind of attitude, I think, is just... It looks dated, it looks silly, and in my judgment, just creates nothing but unnecessary divisiveness.
I think timing also plays a big part in this, because she's not known amongst American audiences. She's not known amongst Hollywood consumers. We don't know her. And we want to know more about her, because it seems kind of puzzling how she went from the road of activist, journalist, documentarian who focuses solely on Pakistani issues, how she then lands a gig directing a film in one of the biggest cinema tentpole franchises in the history. It's an odd career path. And so I think the timing of her statement in her very first on-camera interview about Star Wars, she, instead of providing us with some kind of like Star Wars cred, she immediately comes out playing identity politics and with a chip on her shoulder.
Right. That's how it comes
and
across.
Also, there's context to her statements. It's about time, meaning that all the other Star Wars we've seen helmed by men have been a waste of time up until this point, you know?
Right.
That's just some context that gets inferred. Whether it's truthful or not, it doesn't matter, because this is all on face value anyway.
Right.
And it's created something of a PR nightmare for Lucasfilm, I think, and Disney. And it may have pushed the announcement of the Mandalorian and Grogu film to the very next week, as opposed to maybe in next month's Disney investor call or a convention later this summer, like a D23 or whatever. I don't know if D23 is scheduled for this year, but, you know, or San Diego Comic-Con, where they make that big splash.
Right, of course. Yeah.
So I think that fans just want to know more about her. And in the very first opportunity to provide Star Wars fans with some insight into what makes her tick, she immediately brings identity politics into it. And that's a turnoff. It's been proven. Audiences are sick of listening to Hollywood preach to us. Look at the ratings for award shows. Those things used to be top money makers, and the ratings have just slid down into the toilet across the board. Golden Globes, Academy Awards, Grammys, Emmys, because people don't like hearing Hollywood preach to them as if we're lesser citizens or something.
Right.
And so I think the Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy comments kind of get wrapped up in that too.
Yeah.
Her previous comments about Star Wars happened in an Instagram tweet the day she was announced as director of the new Jedi Order film at Star Wars Celebration London last April. She said, "It's been quite a day in London. The news is out. I'm so very excited to be directing the next Star Wars movie and bringing Daisy Ridley back to the galaxy. I've always been attracted to the hero's journey, and the world definitely needs more heroes. The blueprints of the heroes we see on screen are rooted in reality. I've spent my life meeting real-life heroes who have overcome the most oppressive empires and battled impossible odds, and that, to me, is the heart of Star Wars, which is why I'm attracted to the promise of a new Jedi Order, and why I'm particularly excited about being immersed inside a Jedi Academy with a powerful Jedi Master." So
I love that.
That's really good stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Hero's journey. Okay, you're starting to speak Star Wars fans' language.
Right.
And she made those comments and they fired some people up, you know. They fired a lot of people up. And I knew that was going to happen the second I got wind of those comments. I'm like, oh gosh, here we go again. And because the focus is not on the film necessarily. So it sent me down the rabbit hole of her career. I'm like, I got to get to know this person. So, and I've done this with Star Wars directors in the past. I did it with Rian Johnson. I watched his films before The Last Jedi. Rather liked Looper, I'll be honest with you.
I remember you coming on the show before we ever saw The Last Jedi, and you talking about having watched Looper, and you were doing a deep dive into Rian Johnson. It's what we do.
So I dove into Sharmeen's career because I'm more curious than anything about what makes her the proper choice as a director for this particular Star Wars film. So I dove into her career, and wow, her resume is dense. She's done some big stuff. She's been a player on world stages. She's made presentations to the Prime Minister of Pakistan. She's gone in front of the UN. She's enforced changes in laws in Pakistan. She, her documentaries, you can watch them. There's 2 of them on HBO Max or whatever they call it, but you could stream them. The Girl Without a Face, and then there's another one. I forget the name of it. One is about this weird thing that they do in Pakistan where they throw acid in women's faces to disfigure them, and it's all about pride and these honor killings where families kill their own family members because they have shamed the family in some way, shape, or form. And law enforcement in Pakistan oftentimes, and the public, turn their back on it because it's some tradition or there's some, something.
It's part of the religion in cases. Yeah.
And it's barbaric and it's horrifying, and it really makes me sick to my stomach. So I watched the Girl Without a Face or Missing. I forget the name of it. What was it? I just said it.
I have them in front of me, but the two.
But I mean, you can easily stream this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's hard hitting and it's hard to watch.
Yeah.
And she's done a lot to solve some inequities that go on in that country.
Some of the most extreme examples of brutality and oppression you can imagine. And again, those of us living in the West, it's very hard to imagine that, not just, let alone happening, but then to not be avenged by law, by anything. It's allowed in a lot of cases. Yeah.
And so I dug even deeper into her career because I wanted to see, well, what makes her, as she's a documentarian, what makes her then someone you would want to helm a fictional story, especially a big budget one. And I discovered that she directed and wrote a trilogy, an animated trilogy, that was Pakistan's first computer animated feature called The Three Bahadur. And I believe Bahadur means little ones, the 3 little ones. And it's filled with this fantasy element. It's these 3 children. They acquire superpowers and they fight, the injustices that surround them and everything. And it has that fantasy element. And so I'm starting to see then, she's showing some chops in that department. And then, of course, she came on board with Disney initially with the Ms. Marvel miniseries that's on Disney Plus, which I knew nothing about. But I took a look at it. Because I was like, well, I just don't understand how this transition happened from hard-hitting activist, journalist, documentarian into someone who's going to work on basically stories based on comic book tales.
Right.
And so knowing nothing about Miss Marvel, I discovered that she's a Muslim superhero. And the cast is overwhelmingly Pakistani and actors from India. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, she was hired for her ability to communicate with her fellow countrymen. and understand them on a more cultural level than, say, you know, a random Hollywood director.
Right.
Got me thinking, how does this path lead her to Star Wars? What is it about this new Jedi Order film that makes Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy a proper hire for it? And it just, it hit me like a bag of bricks. I was like, oh, this must be it. Everything she's done has centered around Pakistani issues, Pakistani people, Pakistani culture. And then this Ms. Marvel film was Pakistani and performers from India combined, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I started thinking, well, this new Jedi Order film is probably destined to be populated with a cast of largely actors from Muslim countries. That's what I think it is. And so she'll have the touch. That's the only reason why I could think she is the choice, because nothing in her career indicates anything otherwise. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's very similar to the Ms. Marvel show.
Interesting.
Where it's largely Pakistani actors.
Middle Eastern actors.
Yes.
That might be in the story from a certain system or planet or something, so they're all going to have a similar look, vibe, whatever. Okay. All right.
That's my speculation.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just couldn't put it together.
Yeah.
I couldn't put it together. What makes her the choice? Listen, she's got the hardware. She has 2 Oscars, 7 Emmys, and countless numbers of humanitarian awards. She's a real powerful individual, I think. But that doesn't necessarily make her the best candidate for the next Star Wars film. Unless, of course, it's going to be populated largely with actors from Muslim countries.
Middle
Eastern countries.
Yeah. Middle Eastern countries. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't want to, you know, say the wrong thing here, obviously.
Right.
You know, because I'm only looking for her filmmaker credentials. Oh, and that's another thing. Okay, I want to stand up against this because I saw this argument 100 times online. She's not a filmmaker. She doesn't have the proper training. Even she admits she didn't go to film school. I got news for you. That's the furthest thing from a prerequisite for a great Hollywood director. Let's go through the list. Here are some directors who never went to film school and who were never formally trained. All right? Let's start with Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, Guy Ritchie, Akira Kurosawa, who's not a Hollywood director, but still a director of great reputation. Steven freaking Spielberg, Alfred Hitchcock. So don't tell me that somebody needs to go to film school to be able to direct a Star Wars film. That's not a prerequisite for great filmmaking.
No.
And that's just me scratching the surface of the list.
Yeah.
You know?
The whole formal education thing. Jim, how many people have you worked with in the past that have, you know, brandished their degrees in broadcast journalism and they couldn't talk or entertain or broadcast their way out of a paper bag? I've seen the same thing happen in marketing and PR and things like that. So yeah, you're not going to cut any ice with me just flashing your degree. I think what you did is you went on a very logical path in trying to connect the dots of how do you take this person. Now, is she a feminist activist? Yes, she absolutely is. She's self-admitted. She's covered some of the, like I said, the most extreme conditions of oppression that people in the West can't even conceive, really. The other thing that I think that's interesting, though, because you were talking about, you know, the Middle Eastern countries, and that started making me think about the way Americans look at things versus the way others look at things. And in America, unlike I think a lot of other countries, even in Europe, politics and this is very, very true, especially over, I'd say, the last 10 years, politics has become fashion. You know, it went from being boring, stodgy stuff to kind of entertainment. You got a lot the Sunday morning news shows, and people watched it, and it became almost a circus. But now it's fashion, and people adorn themselves like trendy clothing in trendy ideology, and so I think that what is troubling for a lot of people is that, and what they're really growing tired of, is this idea of politics as fashion. And so that's what this kind of struck me as. And it's as much an indictment on the way media spins things, more so than the words of Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, because we know why the press grabs on to certain quotes, because they really want to play up these angles that the culture war angles that we're dealing with, particularly in the United States. So yes, I do think that her comment was sloppy about Star Wars being shaped by a woman. I would have much rather heard her talk about things like, what does she think of George Lucas and George Lucas's creation? And, George famously pioneered action movies in a documentary style. Maybe you could make a connection there and talk about how you were drawn to, George's iconic style in those original films. There's a lot of different directions that she could have taken, but like people that are dripping with the fashion of their politics and their social ideologies, she led with that. Now, that interview was obviously edited. There could have been other things that she might have said, yes, but CNN's going to grab what they think is going to get people clicking, and boy, did this really. It was not a live. It was not a live interview. Correct. It was part of their package. Their New Year's Eve around the world sort of thing. Right.
She's a very interesting individual, but is she the right person for Star Wars? Beyond wearing her political opinions as a fashion statement, she's talking about life or death for these Pakistani women.
In that case, yes. Mm-hmm.
And so it's way beyond. This is a case of fighting for survival in a country that the odds are really stacked up against women in a lot of these countries, in Pakistan especially. And she's had to fight. She's a fighter. And so those comments that she made unfortunately portray her as someone who sees everything through the lens of gender inequality. And to insert that into Star Wars, which is a history of being a family-geared franchise that primarily marketed itself to young boys for the better part of the first 5 decades of its existence. Now, I'm not saying it's exclusive to boys, and we've had this conversation before. My God. Right. Star Wars definitely is for everyone. Why wouldn't it be? I always say it's not a boy franchise, it's a family franchise. Mm-hmm. So it shouldn't really lean too heavy in any direction other than telling a good story. And it's escapism too. So you worry about something that everyone has looked at for escapist entertainment to then become so heavy-handed, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
That does happen to franchises that were formerly fun.
Yes. But all of this is to say that at the end of the day, we don't know what kind of movie she's going to make. She might make one of the greatest Star Wars movies ever. So there's a lot of people jumping to conclusions, and I understand why they're jumping to these conclusions, because what we're being presented with leads you to that conclusion. We know that there's a a certain narrative, and there's a certain ideological bend that is very, very fashionable and very trendy these days. And as you say, a lot of even big franchises have sort of fallen into that trap. But I'm willing to give anybody in any Star Wars movie or television show a fair shot, as long as it's not a novel. I'll give it a fair shot. So, by the way, I got those titles. Saving Face was her 2012 Oscar winner.
I watched it.
And
I watched
A Girl in the River was 2016.
I watched it.
Yeah.
Disturbing, to say the least.
Yeah, terrible
and
stuff.
Hard to watch.
Yeah.
Because, of the scarring and the disfiguration. It's horrible, really. Sharmeen makes these statements on CNN.
There were other statements that came back to life.
So she makes her big splash by giving her first on-camera interview where she's talking about Star Wars, and she uses it instead of think about how we were introduced to Dave Filoni. It's Star Wars Celebration 2007. We were introduced to this guy. We didn't know who he was. And what does he talk about? Cosplaying as Plo Koon,
Right.
Things that he's learned from George Lucas, ways Star Wars has shaped his career. This immediately endeared us to Filoni. And he's kind of a diamond in the rough,
Yeah.
When I look back at the history of Star Wars, George Lucas hired Irving Kershner to direct the sequel. And imagine if the internet was around back then.
A college professor.
Well, here's a guy, the guy who directed The Eyes of Laura Mars is going to direct Star Wars. This makes no sense. Right. And it didn't. But George knew what he was doing because he knew Irving Kershner and was inspired by Kershner during his time at USC.
Right.
But at that point, Star Wars was developed by 20-year-olds and guys in their early to mid-30s. And then all of a sudden you bring in Kershner, a guy in his mid-50s. It just, everything seemed against him being in the director's seat for Empire Strikes Back. And then Return of the Jedi, Richard Marquand. My God, what did he direct? A made-for-TV movie about the Beatles' early years? I mean, that's really about it.
The difference being, though, that George was firmly in control. Of both of those films.
Not so much Empire. George that's why he hired Marquand as a tool, because George wanted to regain control. The reason Gary Kurtz got fired from Star Wars is because he couldn't reel Kirsch in. And Kirsch blew a ton of George's money with expanded shoots on sets that were scheduled to be torn down 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So but that costs a lot of money, and that's why Kurtz lost his gig primarily.
But as far as shaping the story, the story was shaped by George, and they weren't going to change anything. Although there were a few moments that George was not happy about the "I love you, I know" exchange. But so when you look at SOC, you have to ask yourself how much, as a director, she is shaping the story. Dave Filoni now has a much elevated position at Lucasfilm, and Dave could be really shaping the story of this Rey film. And so if Dave, I do trust Dave when it comes to keeping the integrity of Star Wars storytelling. So it very well could be the case that Sharmeen is going to be directing a film that has a story that has been meticulously overseen by a guy like Dave Filoni and others. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, this is her movie and it's her version of Star Wars. The director certainly can play a big role, but they, as you pointed out with Richard Marquand, they don't always have to put their stamp on it either.
And I think Marquand has certain fingerprints all over Return of the Jedi. You know, I said he was just a tool, but I think he did a little more than that. Also, keep in mind the film is being written by Stephen Knight.
Right.
So, I mean, she's not writing the film, and she is a writer.
Right.
She's not writing the film. And yeah,
Stephen
I
Knight's
think
the Peaky Blinders guy, right? That's the Peaky Blinders guy? Yeah.
Peaky Blinders, Hummingbird, Dirty Pretty Things, and a show called Locke, or a film called Locke. I'm not sure. There's a lot of voices at the table here. But as director, she does have quite a bit of autonomy when it comes to how it all gets captured on the film. The about time a female stepped in to tell a Star Wars story is a little inaccurate, because we all know that Patty Jenkins was hired to direct Rogue Squadron and spent the better part of 2 years developing that story. And it all fell apart, I think, partially due to Lucasfilm's dysfunction and partially due to Patty Jenkins' attitude, which we've come to learn that she might not be the easiest person in Hollywood to work with. That's just, hearsay stuff, but that's what we've heard from certain Hollywood people. And so the Rogue Squadron film might see a new life down the road, but for now, it's totally on ice. But Patty Jenkins was hired to be the first director of a Star Wars film.
And touted as the first female director of a Star Wars film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not to mention, Deborah Chow was the showrunner for the Kenobi series. And Bryce Dallas Howard and Steph Green. And there's been a lot of women directors who have cut their teeth on Star Wars already, and have been for the last few years during the streaming era.
Leslie Headland, she's showrunning Acolyte.
Right. So it's just a little puzzling why those talents weren't called upon to step up and direct the Rey film. If you truly wanted to have a female perspective on the entire production coming from the director's chair. See, that's why I think it's more than just a female touch. It comes down to her heritage and her background as a Pakistani woman. I think that's coming more into play because she's going to be working with a Pakistani cast.
Hell, maybe they're filming it there.
It's possible. They filmed some of Ms. Marvel was shot in India. Whether that was done virtually or not, I'm not 100% sure. I'm really not schooled on Ms. Marvel, and it was only last night when I discovered that the Ms. Marvel was a Muslim superhero. So it all started to fall into place for me. That's what led me to believe that we'll see a predominantly Middle Eastern cast in the Rey film. And that's the particular skill set that Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy is going to be bringing to the production, because all the other paths don't lead to Star Wars. I'll tell you that right now. They don't.
When you're talking about Ms. Marvel, are you talking about Brie Larson?
No. That's Captain Marvel.
Oh, Captain Marvel versus Ms.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing.
Okay.
But Ms. Marvel, she was featured in the Marvel's Flop film, feature film Flop. And a lot of people said that the character known as Kamala Khan, she's Ms. Marvel. And a lot of people really thought she was the standout of that particular film, The Marvels, which I, of course, have not seen.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm assuming, is that she's going to be working with largely a Middle Eastern cast. So she made these comments on CNN, and it immediately hit the nerve of a lot of people online. And then a YouTuber went digging into a lot of interviews that Sharmeen has done over the years. And she found this Women of the World Summit from 2015, long before Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy was attached to Lucasfilm or Star Wars or even Disney and Marvel, for that matter.
Right.
She's, firmly working in the activist field as a documentarian, as a journalist. and fighting for change in her home country of Pakistan. Outside of that, she did do that 3 Bahadur animated trilogy, which is, based in a fantasy world with, superpowers and all this stuff. I took some glimpses of that. You can see some of that on YouTube. That one's not so easy to stream. But it turned out that was the top grossing animated feature ever produced out of Pakistan. In Pakistan, it was only screened there. It's not seen any airplay here, really. It looks kind of cool. The animation is kind of cool. But that's the only fantasy element to her resume. She's really more steeped in the activist field. And she was called upon to sit in on this interview conducted by Jon Stewart with Ava DuVernay and Meryl Streep and Sharmeen. So they're all up on stage. This is in New York, and Jon Stewart is moderating the conversation. Jon Stewart,
he moderated.
He's got a
chat
planet
George
named
Lucas.
after him in Star Wars.
Stu John, where Obi-Wan Kenobi is from.
Stu John. He hosted the main event at Star Wars Celebration 2010 in Orlando. And we were there, Swang.
We were there.
So here's this clip that everyone's so upset about where she says that she enjoys making men uncomfortable. And this is kind of a long clip, so I want you guys to bear with it because she does talk about things like social media and how she's received a lot of heat for her stances on things politically and fighting for gender inequality in Pakistan. You can't debate.
Right.
You can't debate there's gender inequality in Pakistan, a country that still arranges marriages and honor killings and all this stuff. There are parts of their culture that is so barbaric and so out of step with modern society that it makes me want to puke, quite honestly. It makes me uncomfortable. It most certainly does. As a man, it makes me really uncomfortable. As a human
being, it makes us uncomfortable.
This is more than just her comments taken out of context. This is all within context from Jon Stewart's question following all the way to the end of her answer. So, like I said, I just want you guys to be patient, but I don't think the internet is necessarily putting this stuff into context. I've seen so many times the comments she made on CNN last week with these comments right next to them as if she said it all at once.
Right. Very dishonest.
So let's hear this unedited, in context, and understand that she just released the documentary about women having acid thrown in their faces in Pakistan.
You talked a little bit about, I want women to watch this, and I want them to feel empowered, and I want my daughter to have heroes. I couldn't help but notice a thread through each of these, that the men were assholes. And I'm wondering, as one of them,
speak for yourself.
What is the
John.
balance of activating a force for change, but also trying to permeate that patriarchy, that power structure? And is that a part of the calculation of your art as well? And what's been the reaction to that?
Oh, absolutely. I like to make men uncomfortable. I enjoy making men uncomfortable. Not you, just not you. Not you.
Point taken, point taken.
But, it is important to be able to look into the eyes of a man and say, I am here, and recognize that I am working to bring something that makes you uncomfortable, and it should make you uncomfortable because you need to change your attitude. And it's only when you're uncomfortable, when you're shifty, when you have to have difficult conversations that you will perhaps look at yourself in the mirror and not like the reflection, and then say, maybe there is something wrong with the way I think, or maybe there is something wrong with the way I am addressing this issue. So I'll tell you, last year, I began working on a television show that brought stories like this in Pakistan, and men were uncomfortable with some of the issues that we were talking about, extremely uncomfortable. But they started having those difficult conversations. And I think that if more men and women started doing that, looking, in the eyes of people and saying, well, this is the reality, accept it. I come from a country which sometimes thinks that I'm a traitor because I talk about issues that shouldn't be talked about, that these are the issues that should be swept under the carpet. So you will see a lot of rants about me on social media, and that is part and parcel of who I am, and sometimes that used to bother me. But one day I realized that it should be my strength, not my weakness. And the reason it should be my strength is because obviously I am making someone very uncomfortable. And it's only when you make someone uncomfortable that they're forced to tweet about you, So I think that's important. And I now put all the naysayers to one side because I know I have a mission and I know what I want to do. And those voices, their volume just needs to be toned down.
Yeah, I appreciate being able to see and hear the entire quote, it's more than a quote, the whole exchange between Jon Stewart, his entire question, her entire answer. It does a lot. Context is key to things like this. And when she's talking about making men uncomfortable, I don't think she's talking about you, the guy that's driving to work right now, listening to this podcast. I don't think that was really the context. She's talking about in her particular country and in that region of the world where these things that we were talking about earlier that are documented in her films are tolerated, encouraged, etc. You notice also later she clarifies and says that men and women need to be made to feel uncomfortable, because when you feel uncomfortable, that is when it comes to social change or any kind of change. Think about becoming a parent for the first time. Talk about uncomfortable. And then, of course, you change and you learn to lead a more unselfish life because you have these children. So I don't see these as being this quote in particular being anti-male in general. She says to Jon Stewart, I'm not talking about you, Jon. I think she's talking about the people that in her country are calling her a traitor because she is bringing to the forefront these things that are sort of shrouded in tradition, but at the heart are really barbaric, terrible practices. So, in this instance, I think the vitriol that's being spewed at her as a result of this quote is really unnecessary.
Well, to dig that up and then try to connect it to her comments about it's about time a female director took over a Star Wars film. They're two vastly different things, because she goes on to say, I produced a TV show last year. I researched this. In 2014, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, her company's called SOC Films.
There you go.
She's on board with the old SOC. And Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy released Aghez-e-Safar, a 12-episode series for Aj News, which tackled issues affecting ordinary Pakistanis across the country, including child abuse, domestic violence, issues of gun violence, water scarcity, land grabbing, etc.
Yeah.
Dealing with some real barbaric issues there where people's right to live is, every right they have is being stripped away from them. Yeah, I don't think that applies to Joe Lunchbox Star Wars fan who, has a collection of action figures. I don't think we need to feel threatened about it because within the context, that's what she's talking about. So if you listening to the show are guilty of child abuse, domestic violence, issues of gun violence, water scarcity, land grabbing, then look in the mirror, pal.
Right.
But the fear is how is her just like general approach. Like I said, maybe she sees everything through a spectrum. How is that going to apply to Star Wars? Is that the proper platform in which to be addressing some of these issues in the first place? George Lucas created Star Wars as a way to bring back friendly family fare for young people in the 70s because there was a void of that. I mean, outside of cartoons.
Right.
Kids we did not have good entertainment. Herbie the Love Bug, give me a break.
Right. It was so dumbed down and goofy.
Right.
Yeah.
And when Star Wars came along, it was like, wow, this is finally something that scratches the itch. And George Lucas knew that, and he created Star Wars to provide that escapism, to provide an old school serial type of storytelling to a new audience. Even though it's old, it's new to the young people of the 70s like myself,
right,
who were blown away by Star Wars being dropped on us. George Lucas never prioritized Star Wars to address any sort of activism issues. I mean, it was never geared toward that.
It was a fairy tale.
There were some things in the background that were based on real-world events like World War II and the Vietnam War, but George was just using that as a setting to tell a story that focused on the hero's journey. And we know the hero's journey is a priority for Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, just as shining a light on certain inequalities out there in the world. So I don't like her, like I said, using identity politics as her big splash to Star Wars fandom. That's like a victory lap thing. Make that statement when you're standing there holding the Oscar for Best Director. And it was about time a female told a Star Wars story. Hold that Oscar high over your head and soak in the applause. I'll be clapping if it's good enough for her to win Best Director. Hell yeah, I'll be clapping because I love Star Wars. But I think it's just a bad first impression to make on a fan base who, despite your accomplishments, Sharmeen, we don't know you from somebody sitting next to us on the bus. You could walk down the street and nobody's going to notice you, despite your accomplishments. And so you don't want that to be your big splash. Unfortunately, it is. Mm-hmm. And that makes people fear that, well, she sees everything through that spectrum. So what makes her the right choice to guide Star Wars into the future? It's hard to figure out. The only thing I could think of is that she's going to be working with primarily a Middle Eastern cast. And that's what makes her maybe the right person to deal with that sort of thing. It's like exhausting, I mean,
well, it becomes the culture wars and that whole idea that has really impacted entertainment, in particular, even sports to some degree over the last 7-8 years. It's become so tedious, and I really do think that people are getting tired of it. I do think we're going to look back at some of the films, some of the entertainment that has been produced during this era, and cringe in the same way we do looking back at some of the, think of some of the things that look real dated now. I'm thinking about blaxploitation films. I'm thinking about, in the same way that George wanted to avoid fashion, i.e., actual clothing and the costuming in the Star Wars films. We should also be looking to avoid political and social fashion. And that's why Star Wars has remained so timeless, because it did specifically avoid those things and tell stories that everyone could relate to, a primal kind of story about humanity and yearning for something bigger, better, and destroying your Death Star.
Well, I think she's certainly seen a lot of humanity at its worst.
Yes.
And so, like, how, it's going to be very interesting to see how that translates into Star Wars. And it could really, with that sort of mojo behind it, we could be treated to an antagonist in these films that's going to be the most evil of all evil,
She's seen it all.
We haven't even scratched the surface of evil. If she wants to include some of these inequalities she has noticed as a Pakistani woman, that could, that could come into the stew of creating the most evil film character of all time. Someone
move over, Darth Vader.
Right. Yeah. Someone we can all unite against and root for the protagonist, Rey and her supporting cast. I've been thinking about that too. How much in the forefront of this film will Rey actually be? Or will she take more of like an Alec Guinness in the original trilogy role or a Mark Hamill in the sequel trilogy role as somebody who's just sort of like, the spiritual advisor or something?
Right, right.
Will we be dealing with a brand new big three? I mean, I think personally, you'd have to put Rey at the forefront of anything that happens in these films. And everyone around her is a supporting.
My issue with the Rey film is just that I don't think that frankly, I don't think it's the right time. I don't think enough time has elapsed. I don't think that the nostalgia bug for the sequel trilogy characters and era is there yet. I mean, we're just now we're at the point where the nostalgia tugs are coming for things like the Clone Wars. We saw it happen with the prequel trilogy,
and the Ahsoka series.
Yes, the Ahsoka series because of the nostalgia tug that's happening through from the Clone Wars. Yeah, absolutely. I have no doubt, despite my differences with those movies, the sequel trilogy, particularly 8 and 9, I have no doubt that there is going to be a time when those films are going to be looked upon with a lot of fondness and great memories and all of that from a generation of kids that have grown up. I have no doubt about that. I just think it's too soon, and I worry that that there's still that whole era is still a little tainted, and I would push that out further. I would make that my 2027 movie. I wouldn't be making that my 2026 film. Keep going. Let's see. What do we got? 2015 to 2027. Okay, that's 12 years. It's getting there. I think it's more of like a 20-year itch. That's where I think the sweet spot is for getting that nostalgia.
Yeah, but I mean, we're dealing with a Lucasfilm who is aware of the issues with the sequel trilogy, and I think they're really very anxious to try to course correct all of that stuff because they were so righteous about it all when it was going down in the first place, and it kind of landed with a thud by the time Rise of Skywalker was released.
Yeah.
So I think they're really anxious to try to make some sense of that Swiss cheese of a trilogy.
Yeah.
And this is their chance, This is their big chance. So
yeah,
I'm just grateful they're not rushing it. It's
that's
they're
refreshing.
Taking their time with the script.
Yeah,
they keep pushing it back. It's not working, so call Favreau and let's get something in there we know will work. I think those are wise moves.
Yeah,
because
it's very pragmatic. It's a pragmatic choice. Yeah,
Star Wars seems to be sort of listing along in the dark waters without any direction right now. The compass is broken. So get something in there that's kind of a sure thing and that already has fan equity attached to it. Because a lot of fan equity from the sequel trilogy got burnt, either via your response to The Rise of Skywalker or your response to The Last Jedi. You know, it seems like nobody left that trilogy feeling fulfilled or satisfied.
Right.
And I think Lucasfilm is among the ranks. So they're anxious to fix those mistakes.
And here
the best way to do it.
And here they thought the prequel trilogy was divisive and a hot potato, something they didn't want to touch. And yeah, and the prequel trilogy, so many people I have talked to that said, you know, I was really kind of lukewarm about it, or I didn't quite like it, but it's really aged real well. And I go back and I watch those movies and I'm just filled with great memories and all that. And that very well could happen with the sequel trilogy as well. But it's certainly true, and it certainly is the case. And huge credit to Dave Filoni, George Lucas for the Clone Wars series, that whole cast, everybody associated with that, even going into Rebels. It's really that thread has really, I think, been a godsend, because this new thread of the sequel trilogy, just as you say, it didn't land, it didn't stick, and I don't know many people, out of just some curiosity, outside of that, are just saying, I gotta know what happened to Rey at the end. You know, after the iris closed on her in the Rise of Skywalker. It just felt like they really went out of their way to close that chapter. So it seems odd that they're...
So just to wrap up the whole Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy thing, because I've kind of been obsessed with her for the better part of the last week and a half. And like I said, I really went down the rabbit hole of her career.
You sure did.
And
good stuff.
And while I was turned off by the statement about, you know, playing the identity politics card, it's like, we don't even know who you are, you know? And we also are very aware of the dysfunction within the Star Wars franchise over the last few years. We're very aware of the non-starters that have been announced and never happened, you know, the false starts along the way. So the skepticism is sky high. And that's a result of Lucasfilm's dysfunction more than anything.
Yeah.
And it's the result of fans being teased with things that never happen. So many different things that we as fans have had to endure over the past few years.
Well,
and
being
we're not
pitted against each other, for one.
And being, yes, all of that stuff.
A lot of that could have been avoided. A lot of that could have been avoided if it wasn't for overzealous, arrogant, ideologically motivated people within the PR department there at Lucasfilm, people creating content for the YouTube channels, things like that. A lot of it
fanboys, tears mugs being shoved in our faces by StarWars.com hosts.
Yeah,
you know,
ring any bells. I mean, they were absolute gaslighting, absolute baiting because of their arrogance. Their arrogance and their disdain for what the foundation of what made Star Wars great, which was an entire generation of diehard, fanatical fans that they turned their back on because it was no longer, I said it earlier, fashionable. It's about fashion.
Yeah, so this kind of foundation was set in place long before Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy made her brief comments on CNN on New Year's Eve. You know, it's been there for a while, and it's real easy to say, well, you know, men don't want to give women a shot and stuff. But I mean, that's been proven to be incorrect.
Right.
Time and time again, we've seen successful women in Star Wars. We've celebrated successful women in Star Wars. So why turn the clock back on that? Let's keep the progression moving.
Yeah.
And try not to create these artificial landmines that blow up in everyone's face. In everyone's face. So, you know, I'm impressed by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. I'm disappointed with Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, and I'm puzzled by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. I still quite don't understand how the path has led her to be the director of the next Star Wars film. But still, in the same breath, I'm open-minded about Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, and I wish Star Wars nothing but luck. I don't root against Star Wars, and I hope she makes the greatest movie, not even just the greatest Star Wars movie. I hope she makes the greatest movie of all time, because it'll be nothing but good for us here in the fan base and at RFR and within our community if we can go back to celebrating Star Wars like we always used to.
Well, that's what we think. Let's find out what you think.
You must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message?
Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Hey guys, this is Kyle, Patreon member. First time leaving a voicemail. My question today doesn't really have a definitive answer unless either of you know something I don't. Where do you think the story is possibly going in this Mandalorian movie? When I think of a motion picture, I assume that would be a bigger budget to go bigger. Will we get more Luke? But what would have to happen for Luke to show up now? Will we see some rebuilding of Mandalore? Will this tie into Ahsoka? Will Jin have to leave his porch and get involved with Thrawn coming back to the galaxy? Just curious what you guys think and are hopeful for. Really love the podcast. Been watching Clone Wars and listening to the Declassified episodes a lot lately. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Hey, thanks a lot. Appreciate the call there, Kyle. If you want to leave us a voicemail. He was trying to hang up. He's like, this won't hang up or whatever. Anyway, if you want to be like Kyle, and why shouldn't you, give us a call, 708-320-1RFR, 708-320-1737. Leave us a voicemail. So, Jim, the question is, where's the movie going? Now, when we were talking about a Mandalorian or a Mandoverse film in the Filoni film, we were talking about this culmination event that Kathleen Kennedy talked about, that this would be sort of like the equivalent of the Avengers, where the best of Ahsoka, the best of Mando, and maybe even the best of Book of Boba Fett all unite against a common enemy. I think that's coming. I think that will be the Filoni film. This is a fourth thing. This is season 4, and it's sort of the fourth film that is in, significant production per the press release. So where could the story go? I will say that what I hope we get with the fourth, or with this film, and I don't mean this from sort of a boring political viewpoint. Don't take this the wrong way, but what I hope we get is a little bit more context about what's going on with the New Republic. I really want to know who's good, who's bad, what are the problems, what are the advantages. Basically, we need to know what's at stake. If Thrawn coming back, which is I believe going to figure in the Filoni film, if the big galactic conflict revolving Thrawn is going to have any weight, we need to know what's at stake. And right now, what's at stake is a very fractured, incompetent, booby-led government with the New Republic. So I really want to know that there's something more behind it. And there's a lot of things I want to see in a Favreau-led and directed Mando film. But at the top of my list is I want to know what makes this New Republic worth fighting for. Because right now, so far, I haven't seen anything that tells me it's any better than what we had before.
Right. Well,
that's at the top of my list.
sans the removal of an oppressive empire that was basically, imprisoning people for nothing, Andor, blowing up planets. Yeah. I mean, anything's better than that. Give me
that's a pretty low standard.
Yeah, give me the boobs. I'll take the boobs over blowing up the planets. But still, you're right. It's we haven't necessarily seen a better tomorrow coming from the New Republic. We've seen, anything's better tomorrow compared to the Empire.
Sure.
But sooner or later, the New Republic needs to stand on its own 2 feet and needs to prove itself as a government, as a society that takes things to the next level for the galaxy. And that might not happen because we know that there's the Shadow Council, the second wave of the Empire is on the way. And so I think it's going to be largely dealing with the growing threat of the return of the Empire and
the seeds of the First Order,
the First Order. Yeah, I think so. I think like the First Order is the result of a failed Second Empire. It gets a little convoluted. I agree, but we know that the Empire is rising. We know that Thrawn has returned, and he's bringing with him some Night Sister magic. So while the original Empire was fueled by the dark side and the Sith, this new Empire will be fueled by the Dark Sister magic and the rise of the new military machine under the guidance of Grand Admiral Thrawn. We know and the Shadow Council. We know that's on the horizon. And so I'm looking for something that might take a little bit from the Timothy Zahn trilogy, the Heir to the Empire trilogy. So some things in there might be incorporated. And
do you think we'll see a second season of Ahsoka before we see this Favreau movie? Okay, because that's key, I think, is where will we be story-wise by the time this
I'm glad you brought it up because
up.
We did not mention that in the press release, it is revealed that Dave Filoni is still in line for a Star Wars film. A lot of people were thinking this Favreau announcement meant the Filoni film isn't happening. I still think it's going to happen. I still think they're gearing up toward an Avengers type team up where all the streaming characters from that era, they all come together. Jason's showing some new concept art that was just revealed on StarWars.com of the statue that we see Balin standing on at the end of season 1 of Ahsoka, the finger pointing outwards. And it appears that Ahsoka is then standing there along with Sabine. So, and Ahsoka is someone who had the Mortis experience. So she might understand a lot more about what Balin was chasing than Balin himself. And I believe that'll be explored a lot in season 2 of Ahsoka. I'm predicting a late 2025 debut for Ahsoka, season 2. And the threads of that will lead into the Favreau film. I believe that.
In May. So we could be looking at, say, a November, December run for Ahsoka season 2 in 2025.
Yes.
And then in May of 2026, see that go and can get continued into that film. Yeah.
Ahsoka season 2 might be the only streaming series, live action streaming series we see in 2025.
Unless
it might be
Andor season 2 gets pushed into early 2025.
Well, that's true. That is true. Yeah, that could happen.
But in the Mandoverse, yeah, right.
Yeah. Because then you'd have 2 streaming series for that year. You'd have 2 streaming series for this year. I wasn't so willing to jump on board with a lot of the headlines I've been seeing. Andor season 2 moved to 2025, confirmed.
Right.
I'm not so willing to jump at those shadows. But with this restructuring of the streaming series, keep in mind, I mean, we could see several Mandalorian films before we see the Dave Filoni Avengers-style culmination event, if that still is indeed on the table. We know the Dave Filoni film is still being dangled out there, and we know that Dave, his career has always been leading into that direction. I mean, it almost seems extremely unfair to take the guy who was a protege of George Lucas and deny him the chance to make a Star Wars feature film.
Right.
That's on the horizon for Filoni. I think that's doubtless. But when will it happen? And what will happen with The Mandalorian once it becomes a cinematic franchise? I mean, they could pump out tons of Mandalorian films before we get to that big Avengers-style type film. So, yeah,
there's no rush, basically.
There's no rush, and that's the great thing, because as Star Wars fans, we'll still be getting content via the streaming series. But I feel like the streaming era is starting to really run out of gas. And Disney Plus has never been profitable. None of these streaming services are profitable. They thought they would all Xerox the Netflix success plan, and it never happened because they don't understand the ins and outs of the streaming business like Netflix does. And it's created some major issues with Hollywood studios, even to the point where we're hearing rumors about a merger between Warner Brothers and Paramount. Who would ever thunk? Who would ever thunk that could be a possibility?
Yeah,
but
I hate stories of this kind of consolidation because it just means less choice, less less freedom for creatives. I don't like it.
Yes, but sometimes failure paves that road.
Oh yeah.
And I fear that's what we're happening. And who was the grand marshal of Hollywood studios all adapting the Netflix plan? Good old Bob Iger. That's who it was. Good old Bob Iger. You know, CBS really took the first deep dive, I think, when they started to premiere new Star Trek series on the CBS app, which is since evolved into the Paramount app.
Right.
I was really surprised when CBS did that. I'm like, you're dumping all this money into a Star Trek series and you're going to put it online? That almost seemed ridiculous to me at the time. But it sort of adds up now with the way that Hollywood has all tried to copy the Netflix success plan and failed miserably along the way. Once this dust settles, it's going to be interesting to see who's still left on the playing field.
Online used to be where you put all the B and C team stuff. You know, remember, like web comics? They weren't good enough to be an actual floppy comic, so let's make it a web comic and throw it over here. You know, that's where the web. If you were on the web, you were like, you weren't quite cutting it. Now it's the place to be.
I mean, TV always relied on things like, live sports, live news, live area, and cable TV ate away at the news, and then now, I mean, like even sports are appearing online exclusively online.
Yeah,
who would ever?
I couldn't believe it. Here in Ohio, we love our Buckeyes. We love our college football, and it's exclusive to Peacock.
Wow.
To watch my Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yeah, so things are changing rapidly, and you never know. I mean, I really wish a guy like George Lucas was around to sort of see things 10 years down the road, because he always was able to somehow look into his crystal ball and understand where entertainment content and consumption would evolve, and he was right on with a lot of it. George said, streaming was the future. George said cinema will falter because of TV and all of that.
And we're seeing it. We're seeing more theaters closing. We're seeing AMC, despite having a huge success with the Taylor Swift concert film, still struggling, having issues with shareholders. So It's going to be interesting. I think the megaplexes are likely done, and I think we're probably going to go back to the way it was in the early days of Hollywood, where you have these theaters that only are playing 1 or 2 films at a time, and it's going to be big event films, and they're probably going to have much shorter runs. And so, I mean, you've kind of got that, Jim, where you live, the neighborhood theater that isn't, doesn't have 24 screens. It's only got a few, and short runs.
Funny thing is they're going to be busting down walls and building out into the parking lot to add some more screens.
Is that right? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe something between, 4 and 24 is the answer. We'll see. But
do we have time for one more voicemail? I really want to hear what people are thinking about.
I don't think we do. We are way over. We're
okay. All right. Well, we'll save them and get to them next week.
Yeah, for sure.
This is certainly going to be on the table as far as conversation goes next week and for the upcoming weeks. So if you have something you want to say, leave us a voicemail. 708-302
320.
I'm sorry, 320.
1737, yeah.
1737, 1 RFR.
That's right. That's right.
708-320-1 RFR. Yeah, leave us a voicemail. We want to hear what you think about the upcoming The Mandalorian and Grogu film, T-Mag. We want to hear what you think about T-Mag. We want to hear what you think about SOC.
Yeah, all the acronyms. We want to know about all the acronyms, yeah.
And AS2, that's Ahsoka Season 2.
Love it.
Chewie, get us out of here!
All right, that's going to wrap things up for us here this week. The first show of 2024 already in the can. So much to talk about and so much conversation to spill over into next week and the week after that and the week after that. So please, as we said earlier, give us a call or drop us an email or send us a voice memo. 708-320-1737 is the number, or show at rebelforceradio.com is the email address. If you need more, and we know you do, need more, want more, crave more, Rebel Force Radio in your life, no better place to do that than over at Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio, or head over to the Rebel Force Radio website, rebelforceradio.com, and click on the Patreon banner there in the right rail. And from there, you'll be taken over to Rebel Force Radio on Patreon. And we owe so much and thank our Rebel Force Radio Patreon supporters for all of their support throughout 2023 and now into 2024, a banner year for us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You're all full of awesome exclusive podcasts you can't get anywhere else, and weekly full show videos. So as you hear us talking about, Jason just put this on the screen, or we're looking at this, you can check all that out if you're an all-access member on Patreon. We also love to have you on our YouTube channel. Check us out, youtube.com/Rebel Force Radio. Please subscribe, please like, please comment today. Check us out there. Also, follow us on the socials. We're on X. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. Are we on LinkedIn? We posting any jobs? No, I don't think we're on LinkedIn. That's the only place we're not.
We're not hiring.
We're not hiring, no. The website, as I mentioned, for all things and everything, Rebel Force Radio, rebelforceradio.com. But if you want to help us out, if you want to do your part for Rebel Force Radio, the best thing you can do, and it costs you nothing, is to keep doing what you're doing right now, which is listen to the show and recommend it to your friends and family. The show continues to grow by leaps and bounds every year. It's unbelievable. We've been at this for a long time, and it just is so rewarding to see the downloads and everything keep going up and up, and we owe that all to you. So thank you. So please subscribe.
2.5 million downloads in 2023.
Million. Woo. Incredible downloads and 2.5
That's in 1 year.
Thank you. So subscribe if you can. Leave us a review on your podcatcher of choice if it allows you to do such. We love to have those reviews. We read them all. Just one simple rule, please.
Make them good.
All right, we'll see you next week for more Rebel Force Radio. We're back, baby. Nothing going to stop us now. More Star Wars 2024. Big year ahead. Lots more to talk about. We'll see you next time for Rebel Force Radio. I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
The Force will be with you, always.